So to start off this tutorial, we're just going to do a quick recap of kind of the basic code that we need to write in order to, kind of have a C++ program ready to run. So to do that, we're going to create another new file. We're going to do file, C++ source, and again, this may differ if you are operating, on a different type of coding platform. If you're using Visual Studio, or if you're not even on Windows, it's going to differ, of course, for you. I'm just using code blocks because I want to. And we're going to call this tutorial 2. We're going to save that, and then we're going to finish. And so now we have our file up here ready to go. So now what we need to do is we need to write the boilerplate code. So we'll hashtag include IOStream. So that'll pull in, once again, that's going to pull in all the things that we need to do input and output, as you might think is implied by using IOStream. And then what we need to do is we need to use the namespace std inside of IOStream so we have access to all of the different operators such as cout and cin. So then we do int main, open parentheses, opening curly brace, closing curly brace. And again, the main function is just something that C++ is going to look for to start running whatever program you're writing. And so inside of this, what we're going to have inside of the blocks is the code that we want to actually run. So to start this, let's cout, and then we'll do John has 5 shoes. And we'll actually do an integer value for the shoes. And then we're going to end line one more time. And then we're going to go ahead, because we are in an integer type of function, we're going to return a integer value of 0, which indicates success. So we're going to go ahead and build and run. And it takes a few seconds, and there we go. We are printing out that John has 5 shoes. Alright, so that's kind of cool, but to kind of get you acquainted with how things work here, let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. We're going to still print the same message, but we're going to print it a little bit differently. So John has, and instead of printing 5 within the string, because anything within double quotation marks is a string literal, we want to print it out to a character or an integer literal, And what an integer literal is exactly how it sounds. It's just an integer. So John has 5 shoes. We need to go back in here and put these spaces here. So what you see here, it's different, is instead of having it all within that double quotation marks, now we actually have a solid integer value being printed out to the console window. So if we build and run, you'll see John has 5 shoes. It's the same message on the front end of this program. It looks like it's the exact same thing, but back in the code, instead of printing out that 5 within the double quotation marks, we're printing that 5 out from an integer value. And what that'll allow us to do is we can take a 5 integer variable there instead of the 5 and print it out. So what is a variable? So a variable, if you think back to if you've ever taken a math class, it's essentially something that is assigned a value. So think of it kind of like a box that we're going to stuff this value into. So int number of shoes, and we're going to go ahead and set that to 6 or 0. We'll set that to 0. And so int number of shoes equal to 0. That line of code is going to take and make this variable called number of shoes, and think of it like a box, and inside of that box we're going to put a 0 value. So number of shoes will be 0. So if we take that 5 and we replace it with number of shoes, what do you think will happen? Well, it's going to print out, and it's going to print out John has, and because number of shoes is 0, it's going to print out 0 shoes. So if you go ahead and you build and run one more time, what you'll see is John has 0 shoes coming out to the command prompt or console, depending on where you're running. And so what we're going to do is, okay, that's kind of cool, but we're still getting this thing where every time we run our program, it's going to say the exact same thing over and over and over again. It's always going to say that John has 0 shoes, but is John always going to have 0 shoes? I don't know. So let's look at doing this a little bit differently. So instead of just saying John has 0 shoes, we're going to do something where we actually ask the user for how many shoes John has. And I don't know why we're using John and his shoes, but we are. How many shoes does John have? And so instead of doing cout, we're going to do cin. Cin will allow us to take in a number from the keyboard, or a value that the user types in. So what'll happen, cin inside a number of shoes, whatever is typed from the keyboard will be stored in that variable and then printed out later on. So let's go ahead and run this and see how it works. How many shoes does John have? So let's say John has 2 shoes. And once you do that, you hit 2, you enter 2, and then you hit enter on the keyboard. And then it immediately takes that 2, stuffs it into the number of shoes variable, and then that number of shoes variable is then printed out to the keyboard. So that was just a basic input-output tutorial. Also a little bit introduction to variables. In the next tutorial, we will expand upon what we're doing here and work on getting a little bit more complicated with input and output. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.